Good morning, Katrina.
Good morning.
Wonderful. We're still waiting to try and hear Drepon Losaling, so Galar Bashir, we cannot hear you still. Can you please do a sound check?
Oh, ngadu dele.
ngado dele. 단서 야보 고기.
거기도 왜?
고기도.
아야. 아야. good morning 사고래. 그 ngadu dele 사고. 어디를 또 세를 시고통이 가리나?
Galar Bashir, there's some very high-pitched squealing coming from your side. I think if you turn down your gain or your sound system a little bit, it will remove some of the high-pitched squeal that has worked before.
Hello, Ryan. We hear the high pitch sound. We make the bird sound. Can you fix that? And also I think the Shaw was the microphone was too low.
Galar and Bishé, if you could have Genla speak a few sentences, we can see if the high squeal pitch has gone away or not.
Yeah, we are fixing. Our technician is, I think he's trying to fix. And we hear very low volume from your end.
Okay. I'll see what I can do from that end, but high-pitched squeal
Katrina,
is...
can you say something?
Yes. ngado dele genla chiksurona.
Oh, genji sondasa.
Oh yeah. 저놈 담제 교례송 대교 대신 식배송. 줄랑 거봐 가행 봐 그중 침배 되게 송. 구매다.
고기도.
아. 어디래?
Good morning, Genren Tashitale, and good morning, Katrina, and welcome to all of our. We'll begin with some preliminary prayers. You can find the links to those in the chat box.
We cannot hear.
And now transcend and destroy the one who is gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one not to bliss, nor the world, not be speaking. Teacher of gods and humans, you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and when I was supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure body, storm supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I vow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop, a dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn, Mount Meru,
Hello.
foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah,他这首
This one. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, no, did it. Oh, the young, Tumbasan, Jum, the Dollar Sungudwa. Oh, yeah. Tumnam, the Bachu, Mitrushes. Tumbasan, Jum, the Denam, yes, word. Tumnam, the Bachu, Mitrushes. Tumna, the Bachu, Mitrus. Droe, Dunga, Chag, Messelas. Droe, Dunga, to Chag, Pass, Shanda, Tapsi, Medusungora. The Bachu, Trail, so what it is, and a trail of Marissa. Tumna, the Bachu, Miss. Droe, Dunga, to Koran, Chag, Pass, then the Meba Soya, Medusungora. Droe, Dunga, Chag, Messelas. Niji Toba Shala Pomede, Sanji Chumden de Rani, Toba, Tarshimba, Bangbada Yende Tarshimba Rete, the Pangdoji and to the Shalpa Trene, Chigachill Pevanashi, the Nepa Kies to Chalpa, Train Bendusung Yora, Niji Toba Shala Pomede, Bangdoji and then Yonaya Teso, Tungele Tre Pangba, Tungele Trevetani, Langdurjine Maluba Shimbe Kimba. Oh, that's a year now. Shalapa, Oya Medusung Yordo. Rally Yuba de Pa do Stash at Medusung water. Niji talk about Shalapo Medis. Neta tabshi karo is the Tumba Sanje Chumden de Rani, Randun Pusun Chopare, Pangba Pusun Chop, Yamambata, Mishiba Mombaka Pa, Landur Ginetam Jake, or Kimba Tarchim Barete. Ina Tigi, that Shan Jason Zuni, Shan Pendo Chitrugo, Shan Jason Zimbe, Yundese, Rampando Tarchina, Shanlia, the Jason Zini, Rangi, Tobe Yundet Sulian, Gueg, Tabshinangura. The Shan Jason Zimbe Tabdulia, Chini Tembatem Betrover and Juruse. The church in Nelu Monetus Gora. Chini is a church near Nelu, Tembacarina, Nesu Mone Carina, or Titamber, and it tourist Jetogres of Gordon. Marazu church in Nesu, Rang Samlatanda, Shala Samlatanda, Wabola Tata, Tondachi, Gaga Norde Gordon. Oh, did Tata did Madden did or did some data give up and did tango respa. Any Lamga Tani. Chuni Temba Tembe, Dora Jagre Sunguda, or the Robsilan, yeah.
So here, as the Buddha says from the sutras, sages do not wash away sins with water. So here, the sages, the Buddhas, can't just sort of wash away or get rid of our negativities like you would wash away something with water. Nor does it continues, do they clear away beings' sufferings with their hands. It's not as though Buddhas have the capacity to just take away, eliminate the sufferings of beings with their hands, or by sort of washing away their negativities can eliminate those sufferings. Nor do they transfer their own knowledge to others. A Buddha has the complete kind of realizations, has culminated all of the kinds of good, excellent qualities, has completed the realizations and abandonments to attain that state of Buddhahood. But even though a Buddha has such qualities of realizations and abandonment, has this kind of perfection of knowledge and so forth, he is not able to just transfer those to others, to give them to other beings. So here one asks, what is the method then? A Buddha has achieved this kind of state of excellent qualities with all knowledge and so forth, all knowledge of what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned, but they can't just transfer that to others. They can't just give that away. But rather, as the last line of this sutra verse says, they liberate by teaching the truth of reality. So in order to give those realizations to others or elicit them in others, the Buddha teaches the actual nature of reality, what it is that is true, or how it is. So the normal way that we sort of think about things and think about others, perceive the world, the Buddha shows us how that is mistaken. And then by teaching the way that things actually are, we can liberate ourselves. This is the method by which a Buddha is able to benefit other sentient beings.
Oda Kasoro Chu Kangala Soba Chu Kangala Soba Tezul Trishana Tibeta Vive or Tendrea Samlo Tendre Chulia Sanjachum de Chulia Shambating and the Sozu Ordo Tachidan Kora Tibeti Tibayimba Samlo Corne Tijitana some Chu Kangala Trishana Kokewaji the Sagarito. Tigba Kora Tigba Yimbangunji Trube, Ishira Tuchana, Town and Heben by the Marito to the Pengrito. Tena Koti, Tigba Yonsba Tane, the Truche, Tesamji, Namba Kelly Giomato. So with tremendous in a coach train targeted the Tesam Tagamari, Tito Madison Gordo. Tumna Tigba Metrushes. Tigba Singed so same Gisak by Tigba Sonza. Similar. Shanla Tsawa Chebala Soba, or Tindation Tipa Sagiordo. Tindoko, Tipa Taya Tabdia, Semlia, Shanla Tsawa Chebe Sotelia, Tinitipa Pan, Shanla Pembatuba, or Pensim Chambada Niji, Chanjugi Semla Soba, or Tindeton and Tipa Tawa Chevromato. She Shalom Tichibuki Tibata to Mareso Gordo. Only Tina Sanjum Dende. Tardu Yande Ngawate, Randuji Kusikdo Angazo. Pangbata Tope Yande Maluba Rangi, Tujula Sobati Randuji Kos. Kansa Rani, Tarshimban Yu Kuriti Ordo. Shanla pa Tanyake was Shanla Pendo Zeban Zetungue Chava Chetungue Sugudera. Kansaka Nabacha Pa Kusu Yoga Tani Jaya Toya Yobatira. Tele Shandunji Kusigdwa. What I did and Zabacho to Jobade, Shane Labja Suya Derba. Zabakunle Sungin and Zabacho Yense. Or Ti Deco Sungin Zabade, Gachambure, or Tilia, Chini Tembadembetra, Gurusedera, Tikachambure. King Azudi, Donalia Yungiba. Sibe Sungu Chujan and Kijan Namlatense, Tungedin Doe, Judy, near Kunzulia Day Yose, Rangan Yamson and Kenny Sine. Sibe Sungu Chujan Kijanamlet. The Shinshik Batumbates, the Shinshik Langas in Amedo, Charlek and Gans Ote, and then Shalia Rangi, Shinshik Kimbe, Yondenzo Shalpa, Langdurkin net Toyanteres or Dile Lagbachi Chag Tunga Sailors over today or Marsora. The Shinshik Batumbate, Kijanam Chago Sose, Shema Shene, Sheba de Rangi Yamba Samji de Maris. Tobashe, Titunda Soso Samluta, Shembashe, Shesona or Tinashin, Yamliche, Tinashin Chia, Topshiche, Yamso Lemba, or Tination and Pengris on Gordo. Oh, teach you.
So here, like if we have something that is dirty or stained, you can wash that away with water in order to purify that. But our negativities are not like that, as it explains here. A Buddha can't just wash away those negative actions with water in the way that you would do something with form, something that is material, but rather it is by understanding that negative actions are negative, that they are non-virtuous, and having some sort of level of belief in that one is able to elicit a kind of change. So Buddhists don't accept that one is able to just purify in the way you would something material by washing it with water. Rather, we need to work with our mind and understand the way in which those actions that are harmful to others are non-virtues and are going to lead to suffering. And so too, then realize the benefits of actions that are beneficial to others, developing love and compassion and so forth. It's really not as much about one's external actions, but about working with the mind. And so when it comes to the enlightenment of a Buddha, there is the sort of a culmination of their own aims, meaning the Dharmakaya, that enlightened wisdom. And the way in which they are then able to work for the benefit of others is through the form body, through taking a form or an aspect wherein they can teach to other sentient beings, have that kind of encounter with others. And among all of the activities of a Buddha, the supreme among them is the teaching of the Dharma, is the speech of the Buddha. And so that is, as it says in another sutra, like the Buddha explains that I teach the path that eradicates the sort of miseries of samsara, but it is up to you to actually practice that. So again, the sort of method by which a Buddha is able to benefit others, the main sort of responsibility, the main action of a Buddha is to teach others what is proper and improper. So it's not as though a Buddha is able to do for us, but we have to, based upon hearing, learning about these things, then contemplate them for ourselves and actually put them into practice. That is the way in which we are able to be benefited by the teachings of the Buddha. They can't do it for us.
Oh, the India Karsore, Garazu Tiba Mabuchi, Sasha Yordo, and to the Chunjunal Songuba. Chena Gonchilipe, member room ne Chabataya Chichepe, Nagucha de Yuna, Kapkablia, Lord Kuni, Chusam, Yunzam, Lord Kunania, Nichu Judeka, Sabatungura. But then I she carbucho de, give her some lote. Sansangan, Nabuchetene, the Kapkabli, Kachireza, Lord Joanna, she is on good. Mancha Senacol Naguche, Deba de Sudi, Tiba Mancha, Savio or Sogda. Or Tindico, some Samlia, give some church to wear some of the use of coate. 산제기 투 왜 최년바다 어디 진짜지 박사르자 세세 도스도스야 기회 삼을때 윤점마도 기가 말해서도 제가 뒤인도 가라주 가가 개와배 톱쳐줘 디바디 톱첨보 제 천대자마 개와 통만 매번에 어떤 데저 용되어로 뒤인도 가서라 디시산제도 견지됐어로데 데데 개와 냠주로 봐 니라 뒤따도 디바디 톱첨보해서 거라 되니 저외제 때데 디바디도 봐다에 탑시 가리어서나 탑시 초도 겨바데 잠바다 자와 장주고 심 샴팽게 삼로 거야 돼. 그리고 디바 망쳐와데 가주 심젠다 지소날 때네 대던 론디체니 디바사요라. 샹라 차와체네 차도다 가게단 전심다 딘데샤네 디바사요라. 딘데코 토졸 네베 르스키베 지소날 때도 코 심젠을 때 디바사요데 네 심젠리아 잠바다 자와 동해다 tren드다 대화다 tren드 아니 초도 교회초나 장주그 심제기 대한축 통계 단단단단의 심제기 대한축 서아바 대한축 대점비의 장안에 타르심바 심제기 대한축을 톡바맹게 로 동해세월을 톡바맹게 된데 교구세 연대군대기 산계진 요나 섬 장주그 상보 들레 학바지기 되고다지기 탑심에 송거다 뒤도 가라죠. 되고 다해다 개와 표승 속바데 지소날 대도 시알이야 삼바삼부체다 차도 매번 가게 매번 전신 매번 진짜 거네 개와데 똑심부터 티네 용거라 되고 망셔와 뒤도 사고도 와 뒤인데 시알에 차와체네 마rumbe semchane 시알에 체 마rumbe sem창발 된 되고 사고 와래 뒤인데 다 시알이야 차와 매번다 펜버버시 좀 되게 잠바다 니지 장주고 sem라서 뭐 어쩐들 때네 아니 때보다 그래 때보다 초도 교바데 되게 송거도 뭐야
So, therefore, we have accumulated in the past many non-virtuous actions, much negative action, as it is described in the Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This sort of like having a virtuous thought is like a flash of lightning in the long dark of a night. Most of our thoughts are not very positive, not very good, and so to have a kind of virtuous dharmic thought due to like meeting with the teachings of the Buddha is something that is incredibly rare. So it's likened to like this long, dark night. Most of our actions are negative. And there are those small moments, those flashes, wherein due to the awakening of imprints of having met the Dharma, we give rise to kind of virtuous thoughts, virtuous actions. And so recognizing that the power of non-virtue is quite strong, we are so habituated to that, and the power of our virtue is in relation quite weak. We need to make an effort to try to purify those kinds of negativities that we have accumulated and really make effort at positive actions. So the sort of highest, the best way to purify our negativities really is to develop love and compassion, those kinds of beneficial attitudes toward others. When we think about the ways that we accumulate non-virtue, it's in relation to other beings for the most part. Out of our competitiveness and pride and jealousy and anger and so forth, we accumulate those non-virtues. So to purify them, to counteract that by developing love and compassion, that kind of highest attitude of bodhicitta, wherein we want to bring about the welfare of others by sequentially working toward that state of complete perfect enlightenment, where we are really truly able to benefit them most completely. This kind of attitude is extremely powerful in purifying those kinds of negativities and in developing positive sorts of imprints. So on a day-to-day basis, while we are in society, this is something that we can work on, trying to not engage in those kinds of attitudes of pride and jealousy and competitiveness and harmful kinds of attitudes, recognizing that those improper sorts of minds are going to bring about suffering, and instead try to rely on the antidotes, develop love and compassion and this attitude of bodhicitta. This is a really powerful method for developing a kind of positive attitude and also purifying our negativities.
제바 동마 rabgun 제바에 통한 남긴 등이 펜버스에서 Keba Mambolia, Shensim Jela Saw Pemba Trubra, and it Tunge Tamja the Traversha, Tewa Tamja and Debarcha Nyamdo, Keba Mambola Telephone and Besunan, Tunge the Trawa that Tevesu to Besunan Shune, Roa, and it other Tarshim be Kibuki Sanke Betuzoge, Keba Mambo, Rangi Yamula Tene, or Konya the Car Conversane, Keba Toma Rabun Zeba Tuanam Jindini Pember Sise. Oh, then he shares some jelly chambada sawa. And it talk with Shanchable sober, Shambegi talk with Shanchable Chanju with some. On Dini, don't actually pay a chow to Cuba. The wet I had that sauce I had chow to Cuba. Sanjay you come out to a good tumor my body to our tongue. Chanju with some just sooner. And it don't need to wish it all the sober to Sanjay with Kulan do Yora. Chanju with some manner. Don't need to wish it of Yona. Sanjay you go on to make you do your mardo. Tarwa to make you son do the matter. Oh, they do Tangarezo Karisha Gurasana. Sanjay son shabet solia, Tabache, Sambache, Titan the Yana and the Kumbriche, Tianco Chizonal de Duza, Susan Yeri Messinalia, Simjeda Drondiche Becablia, Levia Tapsichevora, Chudi Tigan Lebguora, Tinal Juju Chinge, and it's Narda Mendra Ralia Samlutang Dada. Mission that them don't reach to Samlatan Dada, Chubachedan La Soba. Oh, Tezu Yar do to any Chugichi Pengiora. Tezungemana Shinte, Kevakan do Medona, and a Chugishidaki Pengio Mara. Taking as a lotion to Snayangudua, Casima Bulimba. Pentak by Chongarazu, Shell Penta, Chode, Chusha, Labjaka, said this Iran, Shell Pay, Gavachima Penjal Pay, Chusha at the dress. The pen diet, Choduva. The pen toma to the Pajodelia, Samlun Jurachi in the Sona, and the pen toma is called a church shed. Because they share now, Copajo de Samlung Nemanashi Chiba Deadona, called church shed, and Pachadi Shagurimado, pen get toyo marwa, or the Indian Arazo, Sanjay Sombechole Tobata Sambachene, Anikarsore, Rimje, Tarwada Tamje Kimba. Oh, to the Ralia, Sanjay Shusum with the Panto Wachan and Yamlichan, Tarwata Tamjik and Bekovachin and Katovarcha, the issue of Chunyanyabe. Oh, Kulusetam, December shoes, yeah. What did you?
So here, as it is said, the Buddha, meditating for many eons, came to see the benefit of this attitude of bodhicitta, saw that this sort of mindset was of supreme benefit. This thought, wishing that all sentient beings be freed from suffering and that all sentient beings have happiness, this kind of attitude of cherishing others, of wanting to work for their welfare, this is the supreme beneficial mind. The Buddha saw this through his own experience and then teaches this to us. And so any kind of activity, positive, virtuous activity that we engage in that is held with bodhicitta goes toward the cause of Buddhahood. But if we lack that, even if we meditate on emptiness, that is not going to be something that goes toward the cause of Buddhahood. We need to have that sort of attitude of bodhicitta infusing all of our actions. So it is based then upon hearing the teachings that we implement this in our own life. We have to have the Dharma sort of arrive in our lives, actually impact the kind of actions, the interactions that we have with others. This is the way that we create a kind of change. If our behavior, if our actions, if the way that we conduct ourselves improves, then we can see that we are really benefiting from the Dharma. We are going toward that goal. And so the supreme way to help others, to bring about their benefit, is also through the advice that we give. Whether or not that's actually beneficial is really dependent upon the person who receives it. Do they put it into practice? We can say teachings that are beneficial, but whether or not that is of benefit, I mean, we're going to be laying down imprints, but it's really about whether or not that other person takes that up. So here, recognizing that we want to be able to attain such a state, we should think that we are going to, in stages, by listening to the Dharma, by contemplating and meditating on it, we are going to strive for the state of Buddhahood, for liberation and complete enlightenment. And in order to do that, we are going to listen to the teachings. So please take the time to set a positive bodhicitta kind of motivation for listening to the teachings.
This one. Oh, yeah. Don't I need you to do it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't I do something less, huh? Oh, there is it. That don't say any need you may be setting, but don't say any. Did oh, yeah. That don't say any need you may be setting. Sure, can't in a row. Pumba Kawasichi, nobody really mingri tagiora. The caress is uncle, sure to do, was like Betty Mene, Canel Epshana, Pajo de Hako, she do Tanya tagiora. Ming the man, and it gets a share your mara, Kuba to stem out of it. Ming sure they really call mingri tagiora. Oh, Delia Ming Tagba, Tagdesene. Mingita until managing them all the Pumbari, the Kawari, the Miri, the Kambari, the Chokseres, Tanya Kaga so shares social. Oh, Tisla, Ming the task on the Penangazu Desa, the Ilia, Kambas Ming Tagiora, Kambas Ming Tagiora, Tinashin, Titondi, Kambares, and Kamba Bello Chigiordo, the Tapa Sigara. Kangbe Ming Tapare, Kambas Lue Tapare. Jidang Tanyel, the Tapataga and Ribare. The Kambare, Yonsu Traza, Tagat Samas Zingurmado, Tile Labaji, Kamba Yindan, you look at this, Sajutayaka Yomarwa. The Tak Nurse, Tapete, Kambati Isugura. Again, Simbari, Tage, you should talk about the Kora, the Kambare. The Kamba Candice, Chagan, Rotation, Yaka Yomargo. Zekwe Yomar, Jidangi Tanya do you said, Madame Majeba Taba, some Shaya de Remado. The Hamaguna coming Tagura. Combachino, combat the Cavallos, Hamaguna, or the day or a day or a say, Taxa Chevrati, Hakosana, that Tausara Hakosarwa. That Tagbeton, that is Zayaka Yomarwa. But the Chidan Zaya Yomar, Tendesa Yomarwa. No. Tagdo Zay need you maybe as a church and the China. Mingji Dasha Yor, Korang Dakshi, Chasher, Mambochilia, Rere Chena, Korama Imbechilia, Yamdo Domnetes, Charol, Tennis, Mingji Dasha, Tesamgi, you should talk about the Tanya do Yoba, said Tirese. Or Tita Tanya do Yoba 27 year your Marese. Near Yonani Ramune Yoba, said the regular. The Kambarese and the Kansares Pata, Pumbunga Bukaru Tendra. That is. Saying near Yona, on Dirishas, the company taught the Mari, Sigma Mari, Saba the Mari, the Mari, Chala, Remember, Dirishas, chick mix it in you, Yona. And it talked to say, and need you, Basura, talked to say, near Bass. In a Tarang when you are a Kambasede, Kambe Daxilet and top of some Mari, Kora Rangune, you were ready to go. Which is then the Umatenju a little chokaya, Rangune, you are Mardo. Doctor said, I need you, Yona, and Rangune Yokora. Doctor said, I need you, man, Rangune Mebetes. Mebet on the Mare. You may say it again, touch your Sarwa. The Carso, the Kamba Secretary, all the Kamba Rituasi. And he consults lips on the Palandra or Palandra Dasi. Taga touch your Sati. You may did in a touch of it. She didn't tanya to use it, all sorry. That Palancandes rest, then he had say, Kidena, and he talked to Zegora. Tenitara Yomaresura. Dr. Zen need you may say, what did you?
So here, picking up in the text, this is on page 26 in the English. We're at this point of the unfindability of the imputed object. So here we have all kinds of objects in the world, like a pot and a pillar, and each of these various things we give a kind of name to be able to identify that thing, to be able to communicate it to others, like, oh, this is a table, or this is a pillar, or whatever it is. If we don't give those kinds of designations, we can't communicate. We're just sort of left kind of sitting there stupid. But when it comes to the sort of naming, designating various objects within the world when it comes to the way that those things exist. Like, for example, we take a house, the place where we live, we call this a house. And so when we look at that, we then think house. But when we are, so we designate with this name, with a term, as well as a concept, like thinking, that sort of thought. And so that which is renowned within the world as being a house, that kind of mere name is the extent of the existence of that. If we were to try to then find within this basis of designation the thing that is the house, we're not able to actually find that thing. So when not investigating and not analyzing in that way, like someone asks, oh, which house is yours? And you say, oh, that's my house. That level, we can talk about the existence of a house. That's totally fine, a conventionally sort of existent thing. This name that is designated on a collection of parts. But that is the existence of it, like saying, like, this is a house, or this is an ox, or whatever it may be. But when we try to then search for the thing designated, what one is searching for is something that exists from its own side, exists in its own right, independent of that process of designation. So if there were something that could be found, it could be identified, it would have to, again, be something that exists from its own side, not merely designated by a term and concept, but rather something that sort of exists in its own right. So not being able to find that is not asserting total non-existence. We have to, again, remember what we're talking about with existence and non-existence. For something to not be found through this method of analysis does not mean that it's completely non-existent, but it means that something which exists from its own side, independent of that kind of process of labeling and designation, is unfindable, and therefore there is no such existence in its own right.
Oh yeah. That Thomas Deshe this, not out of any new to maybe call a shaggy or no. It tumbled the dredge, how call she would race ago. To them our number 10 true chebadas. To them our summer 10 true good sarora. Oh, Tendesi at this or no. Tendesi 10 true to them our number 10 true chebada. Rawadu Madu chebadilas. Kasheke tene trubarese, Rawadu Matubarese, Kasheke tene trugure, Rawadu trugurese, Tango Mautuzini, Rawadu trupsigno, Umatenju and the Chimbeneco, Rangune Matusigorno, Rangingone trugumarese. To them our number 10 true chebata, Rawadu Madu chebadilase, Dindra Sigma and Danayase, oh, tene trubare. Tene truba rese, lava yenayako, teba sedelo, tebe subchichu mabu yora. Ko rawa yore, rawa do yoba resena, rawa do yose se mabu yora. Marazu mila rawa yore se, rawa medu se sidua. The rawa didi che chogre se yora mado. Rawa yore se mise kanga kajuba kanga che chog marwa. Ko rawa le rawa ki che rabre yorno. Rawa yobata sede. Chida ko chida ne tene trubare rawa do trugu mare silabina tongbani shebe ngeba yo mardo ngoma to zo la gurdo o tene trubure se suchil mado ne truvete yo mare se segre de ko rawa de cheshora o ma tenju arjine tene trubure se rawa do trugu mare se kora rang ngone yo ye che yo mardo shenda de tene le pa ta ne ba sha wa samla sha godwa se ko thara mabu yo re se gore ta chonda temper mesena temper mebe thara mabu yo chorwa karin na ona shi temper mesi gore se no tine tene trup cheba da raod madu cheba de de sigma wa dana ya se chizam shi temba da tebe se da se ko ten se de kaje shi temba da kaje shi tege yo bata ro yo tinde kanda kala temper Kala Matembar Yobe Rawase, Shala Matembar Yobe Rawatelea, and Eco says you are this order. Matembar Yoba Telea, Mune? Oh, Casre. Matembar Yoba Laya, Rawatu Yose, Tara Tumashi Yobese. 칸에 라와도 막 유세 라와 유세 왔다 라와도 마두 세와테 찍발 납게 요나고 차라 유세 세들이 차와다 라고 마무치 개봐요 그래서 거라 라와도 유세 차라 도마시베 라와도 주베 동시 마와 자나야 동줄라 차라 도마요도세 라와도 주베 주진라 마데바 라와도 주바다 요 마레스 건조가 시그레 동거 마오가 시그레 기나고 주진라 저 마고바 samliya yana rawadu yose tende yo mare sigrido o tinde ko thara mambo yungreso o mate yo rawadu matru side rangune zene chinye me batel sigora shen bashile tone da shen da shida dojile tone bashi tromado koran di yese rangune yimbachiga raya yo mardo tele rawadu matru sigora mado chujile te meguba kora 다시 용그레시 라와도 마주세르 텐짬레 시그마르도 야 어디 시간 타라도 마여도 오세요.
So here then it says, from the beginning, you need to understand the following. So here it's important to understand the way in which, so it continues saying, when the different Buddhist philosophical schools speak of something being established dependently or of something not being established independently, they are using similar terminology. So here, in order to understand this point about the unfindability of the imputed object and what it means for something to lack this kind of independent existence, we need to understand that the realists like the Sutra school and so forth, and the Madhyamikas, the Prasangikas and so forth, are using similar terms, but there are different levels of subtlety involved. For the realists, for example, they speak about something being established dependently in the sense that it doesn't have independence from its causes and conditions, that all things are reliant upon their causes and conditions. But this is not the same kind of level of subtlety that is understood when the Prasangikas assert that something is not being established independently. So here we could talk about like when we speak of independence, there are sort of many levels of autonomy or like being able to do what you want. But this is something that we need to be aware of because the terms used by these various schools are quite similar, but what they intend by them or the kind of subtlety differs quite dramatically. So here it says, however, they differ in the extent of the dependence and the range of independence they assert, with some views being more coarse and other views being more subtle. So therefore, when they similarly use the expression being empty of being established independently, their positions range from gross to subtle. So here, again, there are many different levels of subtlety when we get into a lot of these terms, like not being established independently or being established dependently. We need to understand in which context it is being asserted, by who it is being asserted. It is also true for like the term true establishment or not being truly established. There's also different levels of subtlety that come into the various schools that assert that. And so when the realists say that something is not established independently or is established dependently is the language they would use, they are asserting that it doesn't exist independent of its causes and conditions. However, they aren't going into the level of the Prasangikas, who would say that there's no sort of independent existence in the sense of the thing designated and the basis of designation, and those levels of interdependence, which are much more subtle than just cause and effect, are the assertions of the Prasangika school. So despite the similar language, we need to understand the different levels of subtlety.
Oh yeah, just right. Oh yeah, mawa nam yesigdo. Mawa ta chiruba kanga yongure nangba semjaba meje kanga yongure to. Chitra mawa to dodeba semjaba kanga. Ngobo mawa namje salu jangba tabu chujin la tenje tene keba jusen do chene se. Ngo mawa choge ngobo karina gyudan kyanle tani kesona ko rangwene chi yogo resigora rangwen chi mena ni gyujinle tani su keya ke medo asigora rangwene gyudan kyanle tani kena rangwene chi yogo re pika chi tsayani nye yoba chi yogo resigora gyuzendo chane jangba tsawe rangwene rangshingi chuba am tsuktoba di resi chi tenju chi yogo resigora yoban diolas tenju ane gyudan kyanle tani ke banye tau yordo taba sonza tenju ane telen do desi gyujinle tani keba sonza tenjin rebar juwa sonza rangwa tu tsu keba tu yo ma resi rangwene tsu keba tu yo ma resi telen do di shek resi ora telen do di salu jangba tabu gyujin na tsobo tumen gyuwa la toba le rangi ngo nyeba taase ane nyeben drebu nyugu te yaase rangi ngo tukir wa tuwe rangi ngo yuebe nyugu te ya ane chashe na tsobo she tele tene ane nyugu spa ta shagri mato tina ne chik di nyugu diris chashe che na raya ke yo mardo drebu nyugu te ya chashe na tsobo tuma shi yueba le chashe te tale kato da yibda tome ki chale soba kaya nyugu imba che raya yo mare se ora rada tokbe ti mena ya chashe te zule tene rada tokbe ane di salu jangba se pa ming ta shaba de ane takwa tsamki rangi ngo yusu tsokba de se ora tenjuwa che na takwa tsamki yusu tsokba le ane tsokba le tadun ti ma tsimba che tenjuwa che na takwa tsamki di nyugu resa o ti resa di kangba resa o resa taga shawar mato ti ma tsimba che ne ya chik tsene raya yobada tenre yo ma resa gara tadun ti ma tsimba resa ti ma drikba tsimba se ti drikba ma che se tada chi yogu resa na ma tsimba di jangba she takbe jangba di kanyi she tsena chashe re re wada tsokba kanya jangba yinba she niju mebe rawadu trube cha tuyusam ya mebar dolas o tiri da tunda ngu mawa tsoge gyudan kyanle teni keba sonza rangwene chi yogu re sigora tenju atuza gyudan kyanle teni tso yonde ko luburdu chi trube yonde tele ya tanya takwa tsam re mato rangwene truba yo ma re sigora di nga zu di rikba trubshibe nala kasi lu changi ba gombu lu druge ngu mawa tsoge ra karsare kete yeba mawa nam ngobo rangshingi truba yeba mawa chiru pala soba tezo ina rangshingi yore tembar yore rangune truba ngara zu tonga nashi yore se te koran zu tembe lu reso chiru be lokso reso ora rangi tembe lu imbe tsarwa ne mela te yamsaya ke yo mara koran zu temba ka tende shedu tili ichi chene yosi warese namba sanje be ngwe mawa dode bada chitra mawa semzamba tuzul se yora sanje lamla tene nese sanje chumde degi sungbe sungla tene ane sanje lamla tene ne kula medamana duje tsangma kyudan kenla tene chungwe ane kyugenla tele chungwa reese duje kechi gyure medaba mawa namsigora duje gyurwa changi medaba mawa namsi namba sanje be ngwe mawa solisigora sube ngwe nam cho sung nese tsöba tsun tanda rangshingi yu, rangwene yu, tenpa truba yu se, ngubu tenpar yu be cho sunga de sungwada. Di yamsen re se. Sanje chumden degi gyudan kenle teni keba songza, rangwene yu ma re se, sungba re se. Duje midakpa ke len shindu, tanda yang rangwene truba chi yu se adi, yani meyo ba re se. Yamsen re se sungudwa. Cheza ngubu mawa ke, gyujenle teni keba degi rangwene yu kuba samgi wara. Uma tenjua daba gyujinle teni ke bade rangune meba samgi wara. Gyujinle teni ke ni midakba yina ya tanda rangune yose di sanje chumde degi sungda ni gyawa re yose. O tisi ya tadi shisi mangdas.
So here then, for example, for essentialists, sorry, that's what I've been saying as realists, but essentialists, this includes those kinds of outside schools as well as Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas and the mind-only school even, so for essentialists, the fact that a rice seedling is produced in dependence on its causes and conditions is enough grounds to claim that, on analysis, it must be found to exist independently, intrinsically, from its own side and in its own right. So here, for those essentialists or realists, they say that because composite phenomena are dependent upon causes and conditions, then that means that there must be something that exists from its own side. There must be some kind of intrinsic independent existence or existence from its own side. So this is the position of those types of schools. Whereas the position of the consequentialists, the prasangikas, is quite the opposite. They state that a rice seedling gains its identity in dependence on the constant change of a great variety of causes and conditions, and that this seedling, the result, has numerous parts. The rice seedling is fully established merely through its being imputed. This is a rice seedling by term and concept, in dependence on these parts, its colors, its shape, upper and lower parts, and so forth. So here for the prasangikas, they would say that this rice seedling is established as something that is merely designated, merely through its being imputed. And other than that, there's no sort of independent existence from its own side or in its own right. And this is precisely connected with the fact that it is something that is dependent upon these causes and conditions, as well as on the process of designating or imputing that. So here, if one is not satisfied with that, you're not satisfied with the mere label or that mere imputation, but you look further for that which is the rice seedling, this imputed object, the kind of thing that these other schools assert must exist if something is causally produced. So you look further for what is that rice seedling, the imputed object, that you never find it either in the individual parts of the seedling or in the collection of these parts. So when, if one were to search for and try to find this kind of thing, although for the prasangikas it's asserted as something that is merely designated on this kind of adventitious continuous continuum of causes and conditions, but instead we're to try to find that thing. You can't find such a thing. The consequentialists thus assert that not even the slightest particle is independently established, intrinsically established, and so forth. So as we saw from an earlier verse from Nagarjuna's 60 verses on reasoning, he explains that those kinds of essentialists or realists that assert some sort of intrinsic existence or true existence, it's no surprise that they don't accept the kind of dependence of the teachings of the Buddha. They assert that kind of intrinsic existence, real existence. They're not following after the Buddha's teachings, and so it's not surprising that they don't accept that kind of dependent origination. However, those that are Buddhists, those that accept that things are impermanent, that they are momentary, all composite things are constantly changing moment to moment due to their various causes and conditions, it's quite surprising to say that they still assert this kind of existence from its own side, to try to accept that things are momentary, that they're constantly undergoing change due to their causes and conditions. It's quite a contradiction to then accept, to say that they must have existence from their own side. So that, Nagarjuna says, is what is truly surprising for those that accept the Buddha's teachings on impermanence, but yet are trying to assert some kind of intrinsic existence.
Oh, yeah, Dimedo. Oh, Kavale, oh, Randing, Mawa, Namjini, Tagba, Rao, Rabat, Samrava. Takbing over the Batinde to be around to be your Maris and Mato. Sally Jamba, the Tagba, some Yober, saw my Iban Jamba, she talked with the Tag the Rangun and Eba Yoga, need you, I should do it. Then I thank you and Sally Jamba, Rangun and Yoba, my Imbara. Rangi Chasha Latone Trubache. Dogje Tadog, Tanya Latone, Trubar Jola. Chashe Mambuchi, and they tell you, 차로를 때는 똑wen 디치지 인스파 따기어도 자기다 명다네 똑웨어 티티리 삼삼삼기어라 어제는 도제지 자도게 다녔어라 자이 다녔다 로이 다녔어 때네 조버를 줘봐 인세 때나 랑wen의 주방고 네베 차베 텐데네 텐주와 코네룰레 예지 랑wen의 주방고베 tenji tene truba se de taxila teche doxila teche taxida doxila tene truba de se de ne rawando truba de ka tonggen ge tende de tenjo ma do shanda ge jo sing ma de se rangune truba go ne be trabe tende ne tenjo ko ne lo la yu ji lo shan ge te dan jo me she so se yenga jo kar so de donale yongwe ba kanshi kenle keba tema jese juda ken sobole tene keba de keba marese ora kari keba marese ne tela ke rangshin ji trube su keba marese godo kanshi kenle keba tema ki tela ke rangshin yo maes rangune trube keba yo marese kenla rale kande tongbar shese juda kenla rale ne kigedo ne rangune trube tongbar ese kenla rale kande tongbar she kange tongni she de paes o tongba ni se de rangone truba mebe tongba le tongba se mato ko yebe tongba le tongba se ma res o ti shimba chena chuda tumbe ne tongba ni sheba res ti ma do tongba ni se de kai mengen de ko na ma de to ya ti chi no
So for Buddhist Essentialists, the schools other than the Prasangikas, sutras like the Rice Seedling Sutra are able to refute some gross levels of independence, such as independence in the sense of being permanent, that is not dependent upon causes and conditions. So these schools can refute some level of there being a totally independent thing because it is dependent upon causes and conditions. But they don't go to the sort of level of something being merely designated, like there's a collection of parts that appears to mind and one designates a particular object with a word, with a term and a concept. For them, they insist that the way a rice seedling exists cannot be fully established through merely being designated rice seedling. For them, the object imputed as seedling must be findable to be the objectively existent object imputed, such that you say, this is it. So for them, they don't get to this level of understanding independence as being like some kind of independence from the designating term and the thing designated. For them, they're just seeing that because things are dependent upon causes and conditions, they don't have that level of independence. But they still assert that there must be something that could be findable, some kind of objective existence or existence in its own right. So the consequentialist Prasangikas, however, assert that a rice seedling is not an object that exists objectively. Rather, they posit that it exists in dependence on its parts and in dependence on the conventions that are the imputing names and concepts. So thus, only in the Prasangika school do they know how to set forth the concept of the subtle dependent arising that repudiates the notion of objective existence of an object. None of the other schools know how to do this. So here, this is like, as it is explained in the sutras. So the Buddha has said that that which is produced from causes and conditions is unproduced. It has no kind of independent or intrinsic production. What is being said here is that all phenomena are empty of existing in their own right. It's not just saying that they're empty of existence, but rather it is that kind of existence in its own right, independent of this process of designating or imputing the thing designated upon a particular basis and so forth. It is that kind of existence in its own right that is being negated, not the or objective existence, one could say, not existence altogether. And none of the other schools of the tenets know how to do this besides the Prasangikas.
Oh yeah. 당한주 디라 땡종기 각장고 주세. 단대 가르시고르스네. 땡종기 각장고 주세거든. 땡진 레버를 좋아 되게 tenjin rebar juwe ngo bodi sama ane tongba nyirese temba madruba res songora ti kaucha de gares pa kaya de madruba res madruba de gares tingon jingora tenjin deban jo ngobu dezo tongba ni res koran yo mare tongba res songora da ane koran yuchu de nganju thona shin mare rangwene trube tongba rawand trube tongba songora gares songora se tenjongi kaucha go chu se do 뭐 마음도 전에 땡지 대번 좋아해서 그 랑원에 주바 가요 말로 랑원에 주바 인수 소주기도 와. 그래서 땡종 오마 땡죠 루잖아. 땡종게 땡지 대번 좋은 거부터 저게 될 때는 가서 가르가요. 그래서 대ten도 가야돼 가르려서 그거라. 땡고 주디 시에거래. 뭐부 코랑 가야 말해서. 땡종 거부터 가서 땡종 거부 코랑 가요 말해. 네 가래 땡진 대반 중앙에 동방에 소에 가르선 거래 땡진 대반 중앙 소자 랑원에 동방에 소거로 마도 땡진 대반 중앙에 때 소자 다 땡데 코랑 요 말이 소요 말에서 티 개바치는 셰요라 땡종이 가장 거수요 야 얼티치 교는 너무
turns to how dependent arising refutes the object of negation. So here again, this is getting at when things appear to us, the Buddha has explained that they don't actually exist in the way that they appear. Again, it says here then, therefore the existence of any object is fully established by merely being designated as such and such by imputing conventions, terms and concepts, dependence upon your mind having apprehended its parts, and so forth to be its basis of imputation. So here, what it means for something, again, for the essentialists, for those schools, they would say that because things are dependently originated, that means that they are established to exist from their own side. So here we need to understand what it is that we are refuting. We're actually refuting that kind of existence from its own side, objective existence or existence in its own right. We're not negating or refuting the thing itself. So here, it's not the case that dependent origination negates existence whatsoever, but rather it negates, it refutes that kind of existence wherein things are not dependent upon their bases of imputation and so forth. So anything that is established as like existing in that way, that is independent of causes and conditions and are designating it as such, that is what is being refuted here, that kind of intrinsic existence or objective existence in its own right, not the dependently originated phenomena. Those are not being negated.
Oh yeah, don't do it. The nurse chu kangshi rangi chashe so tashi so la tenese chu kare ne digra namdu rabshi ne computer rabshi ne ro tina chala mangbo yora rangi dakshi si chashe chilo pakba yora nalo tini machine dram mangbo yora tar danchi mangbo yora oh tezuli sigra rangi chashe sigra dakshi sigra 밍 다사기 시럽치 거르와 ngobuchi korwa dakshi chimene namga tongbolya din namdurendi chichirese tayachi yo marto din medores taya yo marwa shichi yo kora tele dakshi sigora namdurepchi namduchilo pakpa yore kolo yore nalo tar yore tezo kanga dakshira tele tenene din namdures pa tagi yora oh ti takwa tsambyen namdu shagurese ti maimbache namdu kadirese tadu tsega runtinal rayachi yo marwa o ti machine kanga galega chigore ni namdu person se tinal me yorwa mege kugudo me chi lega chigudo tezu kanga chene ni domne namdu pergido segora namdu papsu segora lega chinga mangbo yora namdu si chi lega chinga si yo marwa me te namdu tange kore kholo tozu kore machine tozu kore tina tar tozu kore lega chinga pe mangbo yora kanga lega chesuna ne ta namdu dugudo pergido ta papsu se shagoro mato tesam mazim bache ta namdu khandis pawre pamge namdu khadirese cheche ka yo marwa ta ga cha shajiro o namdu se tene ta ponsam le shajiro mato rangune di namdu re shase chi zu zu yo marwa ta chidan konji den tanye do chene pe namdu chilo pabo tonso ta den namdu lep shase 줄로 тел레테네 파타그로 대삼도 샤초라 이네 다 가바요레스 다동자야지 요마라 tena chö kanshi rangi chashe so takshir chö kanshi namruda kambuta kare na lega chenge rangi chashe sam takshi takbe shich korwa o ti takshi suwa la tene se takshi chi tong tele tene ani di chi re shas pa la gurwa tanya dagirwa takshi suwa la tene dokche ge tanya ge wange se Dio se di namru re shas di kambuta re se di motor re se pa she takwa samji yusu sokba yin bar truba shi takwa samji yusu sokba re so da yodan yulu de tage simba cho da tage diksa da timado da chachi ta ke yo mara yusu sokba mayin ba ne truba shi yodan ni rawa do truba rangwe ne truba shi go da 대삼지 쪼바 마르 남두 연계치 요레선 다가그레선 주구조에치 요 마르 티 요나니 남두랑 오네 요바 랑신지 요바 랑게 ngoyo 요바 랑레 요바 템버리 요바 당담버리 요바 수톱도 요바 따수도 요바 제수도 요바 데 강가세 카리네 제세 초라 라와도 요바다 랑게 ngoyo 요바 조바 yen라세 데다리 임바야 어디 콘데다 시게바날 소샤세 로벤 다와 드라바게 시게벤 드라바 요르와 저도 샤다게 드라바 티 시게벤 드라바 로벤 다와 드라바 챈더케 디 송샤스오라 텔라 다제 차와네세 저도 케셴버레 콩토세데 오마바 라게치 로벤 다와 드라바데 강가 오마 탱교 세 송세데로와 저 콩게데 송샤스고라 텔라 다제 차와네세 chitang da kansa da nga da se tuzule da se chora ta da de chotamje da me se da dere de chotamje da me se de kansa chikbul ko mare kansa maimba le ko yore rawa ve tangi de da se gore tangi se chora pube tangi namju tangi ngo rangshin tangi se chora rang ngo se do de da se ora rangwe ne drube tangi de da se gora 티 간사 때도 간사 랑원에 주베다 매버달라 간사 다메세 가와 bombal라 소바 랑원에 주베다 매버달라 최기 다메시거라 이 엄마 탱겨로리아 다예 다메세게 티모 많이 바샤야 다디셰요다 텔라 다제 자와네 간싱고부 남제 샹라 라말레병오 랑신질레세고레 송고도아 다 라말레세데 타라 mambu 용구로아 샹라 라말레병오 라말레베 랑시암 라말레베 아니 엠바투밤 초도도 투밤 다수도 다 마부셰요라 텔레세그레세 데 메바네 다 메바와서 라와도 투베 다 메탕이 메바들라 추탐제 다메 스카사 다메 추기 다메 세그레스고라 야 데네가 랑게고데 랑시데 데 메바네 다 메바와서 데네 추다 간사기 예베 니스토데 다음에 될 최기 다음에 다 가사 다음에서도 가사인게 메다 sembianle soba tezo rawa도 tuwe 메바들 가사 다음에서라 다 가사 마인게 추 수단 다다 티다 로다 레샬레 소바 남가 데 모텔레 소바 남둘레 소바 테조 라와도 투베 메바들 최기 다음에서라 최다 가사 뉴스 체베 가사 sembian 소용게 메다 전둘레 소바 테조 시그라 맹갱게 지신 낙셀레 소바 강바 돌레 소바 카도 입레 소바 테조 최시그라 최다 가사 뉴스 체 어떤다 가사 라와도 투베 메바 가사 다음에 최가리나 때한테 라와도 투베 메바 랑원네 메바 쿠란 근원에 개요요 말에 전다 마인게 질리 파타 르파 따샤요라 대삼레 마도 쿠란 근원에 간디에 원에 주주세지요 말에 랑원에 여바치 통고요는 알아서 돈도 랑원에 여바치 소설 차샤네 따라와 아수도 소설 원에 지 여바 삼기도 마도 풍부다 소보다 샘다 초하다 도시다 대졸 때네 딱 받sam라 나세기 삼도 지금에도 아디게 소보레 디게 샘레 디치지레세 소소 단다치 요단셔도 랑원에 랑레 여바스도 Rangle Yoba. Shanle Ten Tasha Samay Bang, Konang Yobasa, Susimene Yobasa, O Tilia, Rangone Yobasigua. O Dati, Shigaba long time, Telatacha on the Kashingo of the Shala Rama, or Ranshindle Segure. Tashala Rama said the Karasa. Judan Ken Shala Rama Lebo Chua some Sigmare. Jujin Shala Rama Lebo Chua de Yomarese, Shandaga Hagura. Shandeliata, Karishawara, Shandela, Chasheta, Dojig Tanyete, Dojig Lode, Dinamdu Rese, Mengi Tanyeta, Dinamdu Onyambe, Loy Tanye. Oh, the Chashe Chiletene, Koran Maige, Kolodan, Chi, Pagwadan, Kolodan, Nalochi, Nalo Den and Namdu Suru, Nalo to Sultan Taviora. Chilone Pata, she did not do the Pagwata, Colotos Sultan Pata Viordo. Oh, the Tene Takwa Sigora. The Shala Rama Leba Sudan, Dosig, Tanyela Rama Leba. Tanya Yawangi Pashagwa Maiba. Koranga Chashe, Maige Chashe to Sultan, cheap Awam Nalogi. Goda Gegula Sobatazulitane, the Namdu Res Pataviora. Oh, this is a cause. Chasheta, Daxiam, Chashelatene, Dosig, Tanya Young, the Namdu Res Patagua. Oh, Tila Rama Lebecha Koran Yovayena, and the Shala Rama Leba Mora Shere. Shala Rama Les be Shandi Shegorda, Jujin Shala Rama Letre Koran get Chashe Mambu Tesuda, and then Dosig Tanya Nila Rama Lebecha, Kokoranchi Logachi, Munzing Yuna, and the Ramune Yoba Ranshin Yuva Tembatu Shoda. O to Yomara, Shala Rama Lebe Mosete, Shay in the Jujin Rama Leba. Yoba Tinder Sigmarese. The Shichashe Teletane, Dozig Tanya Yawang Pashawa, Dogbe Wang Shasigdwa, Tanya Yawang Shagwades, Tanya do Yoba de Sigdwa. O the Dogbe Wang Shagwades and Donald Gudwa. Nazo Medo Ida Shakala Soba that station. Medo Dobrella Soba to the Beshiba, Yabu Shibutoya de Sigora. So Leon Patagi or Desera. Nazo Yiga Medokashi, Sigi Kanjo, that is long down matter. The Dada Shibunga, the Tobe Wanga Shabbos, Abo, and Yinjim Shivish Doas, Yabu Shivish Doas, Togapa, either one at me home, but then Zeba to the Pasha Yora. Togwala Madenici, either one China, some met in the tongue with the Tongmarang, as a big tongue, I sit and do to Shanda Tongra. Medore Sayers Tonga Mato Yabuda and Rick Tongmato. Oh, Tamadas, I teach you Lavnia, de Casera. Kibado. She songs is about.
Yeah. So, here, then, again, going back to how dependent arising refutes the object of negation. So therefore, the existence of any object is fully established by merely being designated as such and such by imputing conventions, terms, and concepts. Independence upon your mind having apprehended its parts and so forth to be its basis of imputation. So we can take any sort of example, any kind of phenomenon, like a plane or a computer or a car or whatever it may be. We have a particular basis, those collections of parts, those things. And on that basis, we then designate or impute a particular name. And other than that sort of imputation of a name or designating with a concept, with term and concept, there's no sort of objective existence beyond that within those things. So we could think about like a plane. When we see a plane flying outside, we see sort of the external part of it and we say, oh, there's a plane. Or we're inside the plane, we see the inner part of it and we think like, oh, this is a plane. But beyond that, if we were to search for, okay, this is the plane, this thing that exists independent of causes and conditions or independent of various parts or that is independent even of our mentally labeling or designating it, we can't find anything that exists in that way. If we're trying to look within the basis of designation for the thing designated, you can't actually find it. If there were something that were existent beyond that, as it says here, anything something not established in this manner, as dependently designated, would be posited to exist independently or to exist by way of its own intrinsic existence. So there are many different terms that we can use for this. It would be truly existent. It would be something that's like solidly existent, existent in its own right, existent in a way that is able to bear analysis or withstand analysis. So this is really important to understand, that it's this kind of existence that is being negated. Anything that is established as existing independently in this way is what is being negated here. So then giving an important quotation from Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas of Aryadevas, he says then, self, in the term selflessness, refers to the intrinsic nature of essence of things that is independent of anything else. So here, when we use this term self, sometimes we use the term self to refer to like the person or the I, and in the conventional sense, that is something that is existent. But here, this use of the term self is something that is applicable to all phenomena, that is referring to this kind of intrinsic nature or intrinsic existence independent of anything else. We can use sort of the same word that we use for self to refer to the nature of something, the sort of essence of it. And in a conventional level, those things can exist. But here, this is referring to this particular kind of existence. Self here, in the term selflessness, refers to the intrinsic nature or essence of things that is independent of anything else. The lack of this kind of self is selflessness. So here, this kind of understanding, the uncommon understanding of the Prasangika would be this kind of independent existence that is independent of causes and conditions, independent of parts, independent of designating on a particular basis of designation. That sort of existence is what is being refuted. And so there are various levels of subtlety, again, the Prasangika being the most subtle. But here, this, again, self is something that we shouldn't understand as like just referring to a person or animate things that have a mind and so forth, but rather this is referring to the sort of existence in relation to both animate, sentient, mind-having beings, as well as all other phenomena, objects like cars and planes and so forth. So this then, any sort of existence that is independent of, so here, based on the division of the basis of selflessness into persons and objects, there is the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of objects. So here, again, there's, when we think about what it is for something to be truly existent, this sort of existence is to exist from its own side. This is the way that things appear to us, as if they are not dependent on their various causes and conditions, or dependent upon their parts, or dependent upon their being designated on a particular basis of designation. And again, the level of subtlety that is understood by the Prasangikas is not just negating a self in terms of this kind of independent or intrinsic existence that is not dependent upon causes and conditions, but rather is the level of subtlety of recognizing that all phenomena are, but there's this process of designating on a particular basis of designation. If there were something that existed independent upon those designating terms and concepts, independent of the various parts, independent of causes and conditions, this is the kind of self that one is talking about here, that is negated. So here, again, the Buddha has quoted in other places that all arises due to the force of conceptuality. It's like when we see a pleasant object or see various beautiful things, it's not as though they are beautiful or pleasant in and of themselves, in their own right, but rather it's due to our mentally designating them. Like when we see a flower, we might think, oh, that's beautiful. When a bee sees a flower, it sees it as food, and so forth. So there is, in this way, no kind of intrinsic existence, again, to get back to this very important quotation. Self, in the term selflessness, refers to that intrinsic nature or essence of things that is independent of anything else. And that's independent in the sense of not, as it continues after this, it would not be feasible for anything with independent existence to possess multiple parts or to exist independence on its parts and its imputing terms and concepts.
Oh yeah. 시송제 더 최강시 된데 라와도 주바시 여바이나 시고라 남도 잡시나 고 차셰다 도지게 왕게 파샤 먹고 하셔 코란 라원에 주바시 여바이나 남도 데리서 로가 여르바 콜로다 박바다 뜻 파샤 뜻게 마토나 텔ngo 샹드치 요고라 최강시 된데 라와도 여바이나 라원에 남도 세치 여바이나 니 차셰를 뜻 고야요 말고 그 차셰들 파샤 가그레 데리서 로스 차셰레 로스치 요고라 텔레니 차두마다 제바세 고야요 말 차도도 띠요 말 차코란 소리 남도 코란 로스치 tesul shendu chi sha yogura te yo marwa te mena tesul tene takba sam sha gura ma do shen yo mar do onchi da che ka shi ten de rang ne chuba rang shin ji chuba rang ge mo yo chuba ta se ba che ra ye yo ba chi yo na nam du di re se cha she da da shi du do ji lu te mo go je pa yo ba yin na se gora ne tele cha do ma da che ba ke cha do ma da che ba da cha do ma le tene do ji ji to ge pa takbal tene truba sayade ko mare tokbe karta ne mata ne koran yingejin di resya chashe di ko chashe re pakbare di mare di ko kolore di machine di tongen kansare di mare di resya loga chin zu su se skora ta se ba che so skora o ti yo mare ti yo na ne ti chashe ta che ba re mare do che ki ta ko ya yo mare koran ngo koran dubde ne nga pa ma da ba su nga de yin se re su tu be ba chi ko na che kan she ten de rawa do ye ba ye na cha she do ma da che ba da cha she do ma le ten ne do che ji pa de ta ba de ta nye ji wang ge sha ba de ko ma re se go ra ta nye ji wang ge sha ba ma yin ba koran ye sho go ra ye go ra kan she la ten ne ye ba la cha do ma da che ba nye do ko so sa tene takwa yena chadu mada chepan dokchele te kure tene takwa mayena ko koran chadu zu pasha tele losu koran chi yo kurwa tene ani chashele te me kuba dokchele te me kuba koran di resi losu ngunzi ches korwa oti me resi kora ya tibodo chi juna.
So here, again, I'm finishing that quotation and then beginning on 28, it says, it would not be feasible for anything with independent existence to possess multiple parts or to exist independence on its parts and its imputing terms and concepts. So here, if we have some kind of existence that exists in its own right or truly exists, then like say, take, for example, a plane, one could set aside all of the various parts. If there is some sort of plane that exists independent of those parts, you set aside the wheels, the exterior, and so forth, there needs to be something else that one can point to that can say that is the plane, separate and aside from the parts. If it has that kind of independent existence, then the plane needs to exist independent of those various parts. So when we set aside all of the parts, what can we find to point to that is the plane? Like if we set aside the wheels and the body of it and the person flying it and so forth, what can there be left? So if there were this kind of independent existence, there would have to be something that can be found, something that is able to bear or withstand analysis, independent of our designating it, independent of its various parts. So again, when we have like something like plane, we would have to be able to find that thing that is the plane, independent of all of the various parts, independent of our dependently designating that or using terms and concepts in order to designate that as plane. So if something existed from its own side, it's not necessary to depend upon its basis of designation or depend upon those various parts. If something has that kind of existence in its own right or objective existence, then it cannot depend upon various parts. So it continues here to saying to exist independence on something else requires having parts. So when we have this kind of dependent existence, you always have something that is dependently designated on a particular basis of designation, and therefore it includes having parts.
Oh yeah. This one. Oh, that day, yeah, we can hear with her. Consider I said, time, just wrote him. tenjin rebar jungwa kan tene tongba nidu she sashi kab sungudwa ti tsikdine ngeba chane awore chashe da dakshi da tezole tengudwa ene dokshi ki tanya le tengudwa ti tenjin tezu kanga relne ene chi pa di mare segudwa tenjin rebar jungwa kan she ra tene tongba nidu she ti rangwane tongba re she ra rāngane tōngu mēne tēnjīn rēl kē kūgu mūdwa māngbō tūsū rōba kē tīgu mārwa tēnjīn rēbari jōngā kā tēne tōngba nidhu shēyā sē tē rāngane trūbē tōngba rē sē kōrā tā nā kō mē rīwē sē mē mā rē sē tēne tēne tāgbā tē chāshē tā tē sō lē tēne dōgshē kī pā tēne tāgī dōwā sē tāgē yūchū tsōba rē sē kōrā tē tāgē cīmbā chē kōrā tē māyī kī tōwā chī nē yāngyā kāgī rē sē chē chē yō mā rē ngōbu kāngā tāgara, kāngsāya tāgara wā sōkbu tāngā, sēm tāngā, tsōhā tāngā, chī chī ngō tāngā, chī pāchū rā chī nā ngāmbā chī kāril tēni chī tāgara wā tē tāngā pā tē tsamli wā shā kura mā tō chī tēli lōsa kē wā mā tō tōndā tēnjīn rēbar jōngā kāngsā chāshē māngbō tākshī ndōkshī lā tēnjīn tēsū tēn rēnē nē dī rīn dī mā rē sī shā kura wā sī kura tēnjīn rēbar jōngā tē rāngwēne trūpē tōngba rē sī wā rā tēnjī rēpa chōngā tēne tōngba nī tu shē tā nā rāngwēne tōngba rē tēne tā mē rī bē sī nā mīndu wā sī chāshē tē sū mō tā khurā mīndu wā sī wā yō rē sī wā rā tēne tāpa tē chāshē tē sū lā tēne lē pā dāgī tu wā sī wā tāgba tē tsam lī yā nam rū shā ku rē sī tēne kholo tā chī mā māngbō yō tō tēnē kārsara tēne dāgbā tēne umē lāmi dōsi sā umā tērē rāngwēne trūpa yō mā rē tākvē tātā trē sōngā tēnjīn rēpari chōngā tsamla chāwā rōngā tē shā gu yō rē chēpē tāli trē sōngā tē tākshē kī tāngi tā trē yu sē tē tērā tēlē umē lāmi sī kī rē sī kī rā tēnē tāndirīmbā tiyā tēchī lāmi
So this is a very important point to understand here, as it is said in Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, that whatever is dependently originated, that is explained to be empty. So here, whatever is dependently originated in the sense of being dependent on its basis of designation and that kind of imputing the force of that imputation, it's empty of existence from its own side, empty of that kind of autonomous or independent sort of existence. But then one could ask, well, is it totally non-existent? No, there is that dependent designation exists. Things are designated in dependence upon their various parts, upon their bases of designation, and that is the extent of their existence, whether it is like our 5 aggregates of form and feeling and so forth, or all of those external various objects, horses and cows and whatever, the extent of their existence is completed in their being merely designated. If we search for something beyond that, some kind of existence that is independent or from its own side, that is what cannot be found. So all phenomena then exist in dependence upon that process of designating on a particular basis of designation. But again, if we were to ask, well, does that mean that it's totally non-existent? That is not the case. So here again, to exist in dependence upon something requires having parts. So things are dependently designated on their particular bases of designation, and that is the extent of their existence. So this continues saying that the path of dependent designation, this is the middle way. So this negates a kind of extreme of total non-existence or an extreme of like reified existence. Dependent designation is then the middle way, the sort of the path that exists free of those two extremes.
Oh yeah, sorry. that is so. Yana nyugu tabu rawa to rangi ngo nye ba yona sigora. Nyugu yena kasa yena da, namdu yena da, ngobu kandeshi yena ko rawa to tubachi yone rangi ngo ti chi chane raya yona sigora. Ane kyujin da takshi jungwa so, kyudan ken da, ane takshi pike sachu melung la so ba kari na tuzu la sigora. Joaso dube ngole loshina. Tesu pashane loshi, tile losu yanchi yoko desigora. Rawadu yona sigorda. Namdu rangune, rawadu tu, rangune, rangshin ki yoba yena. And then Namdu chashe tuzu kanga la maduba tanda ko losu. Dimari, tan dire si cheche chi cordo. Oh, di loshina, rangi, yangarwa, korambe loso, chashe tuzu pasha, dimari, dire si cheche ragurwa. Ni yangarwa, koran chibu, loso. Yangarwa, gashido se, yangarwa bashido, yangarwa konan chi ragure se, dakshidan, dakshido ke mena ya ko ngunzichi ya yogusara. Kuba loshido, kuba ne kuba yina yanse, teda mayin barse, o tenda yo marese gora. Jangba tabi su se ya, namdu tabi su yina su so ne, segen dube, tangi do yoke se. Segerwa, sayin junga, meyin junga servta, lugi chakwe chato zula sayin junga sigdwa, chala sobata zula chuyin junga sigora, ni choyo to zula meyin junga serva, lungi chua puga namga tongsan to zuda, ni lungta tezo sa chu me lung, namga sido tongsan deli sigora, kokbe nang tongsan koro uta sigora, chilo namga sigora mare, jini, Segen dube tangi do yo de se. Teda da trena rangi ngo mineba yinbe se. Chunam tutu do yo je rangune yoba mesi do se. Kansa rabji shaba yina. O de sosu lugi cha sa chu me lo namga namshi la soba tazu kam churwa sa chu me lo namga namshi la soba o tazu duba la tene ane pa tata ne tata se de shago de esigora. Oh, dene karisa. What is Dube tangi duye, Tedada Tena Rangango, Medeba Yembe, Chunam Tutu to Yoji, Rangune Yoba, Mesito Osa, Turne Truba, Dakshida Chashal Turne Truba, Doxile Turne Truba Yoji, Ko Rangune, Nadi is Rangon to Trubachi, Sigmare, Umare Sigora. That day, young Kansa City, Rangune Meverete, Dakshi to Yan Yore, some Teo Marwa. Dakshi Soborwa, Sobor Rangune Yunayas, Luis Kibi Lude, Chazan, La Tushin, Mikitoya, Miki Ombu, Yuganave, Ombu, Neombuche, Ombola Soba, Tezukanga, Yungaji Seura, Nalo, Nanja, the Kanga Yora, and Luis said the Kadiresana, and Chilingunji Yomar, Kolichasha Mambu Yora. Satan, Pakbatan, Nalo, Tratan, Chibri, there's a Samal Tushin, then the shower mother or matter. Dakshi Koran, Ya Rangune Matu. Namdu Sidu, Rangune Medu de Tati, Nalo Kolotan, Chitazuri, Rangune Yuba Solichitongo, Dakshi Sidu, Tizo Chibade. Chitar Kuji Tag and Dushini Sheba de Shikula Lo Charja Songoda. Social toll some day or Mundeshana. So said and I said, Soboda Sem that so other Sobole Chasha Mamshivi order. The Zula Turgid Danish Shawara. And it's Sa Chu Me Lo Namga Namshilla Soba Tezula come true double tenant agra. Utangudwa, lonely Tengiora. True Kugudwa, Main Juma Kugudwa. Oh, and it's Luby. Trouble such a quarter, Charles over Chua quarter, and a long Udansagi, Tongba Korwa, Tongba Manishidura, Tongsa, Udansa. So Kibu come to Dubachers, Kibu de come to Sobal and Dubala Tenipatavi or this or Midabsinara. No, Kibu come to Dubachers. Oh, yeah, that do it. Oh, Kawaleson. Yoba Messito, didn't matter. That Chamela Tinjunda, Tanyabet, Miron Lase, Chachi, Chijumanga, Cheneco, Tanya do Yoba, that Teninjo Sigmare. The Tenju Lula to den Chame Yomare, Sheba Kaji Chamesero, Chameba Yomar, Chashi in Jimmy Yogora, Chashi Megune Yon and Koran Zutu such Yosara, Rangune Rangshingi Yodugora. Nangbalia to the Chameda to the Kelly or the Umabaga to the Chamekeli Marwa. To the Chachi Chigimanga to you and to Ranguni to Badagara. Chamela Tinjunda Tanya Beton Mirola. Tinjunda Tanya Beton, Donla Chaje, Chaje da Church to Metangi to Yoba, Rovese. Tinjunda Tanya Betonina, and it's Chaje, Chamabu Yanga Yoshore. Church in a Chashe to my Yanga Tangiche Yoshore. Yoba Rove, Rawado, Yoba Meriso, Rawado Yoba, Rangune Yoba, Tembato Batende Yomaras. Then I think you in bed to send Jesus. Rawado Trubam, Rawine Yoban Gobandine, subject Tala Tardugi, Rigbayinoso, Oma Tenju Lula, then you in bed to send you Rawine Trubeton, that Tartu Saturday. Then did the rest order. Then did the Rebecca would enter Tenzis to Taraj Tonaco, Tenzi Debarjo, Kudan Kelly, Kedan Kiluta. Taxida Chashel turned the court of Dr. Lutelia, Ralene, and a tomba Shekuyoto. Then I think you in bed, you send Rawam Rangone Yaban Goba Dini, Trashi Sabla, Tartugi Rigba, you know, Tadaria, and the culture alone the Trashana. It should go. Yeah, what is Kuna?
No. So here then again to put this another way, it says then this one. To pick up again from the text, it says to exist, to put this another way, were a sprout, for example, to exist independently with an essence that you could find, then it would have to exist only in isolation without depending on causes and conditions, and would not be identified as an aggregation of the elements and so forth that serve as a basis of imputation. So here, whether we take a sprout or a person or a plane or any other sort of object, if there is something to be found that exists independently, some sort of essence that is independent of, again, it exists in isolation without depending on causes and conditions, including that kind of process of designating. If that were the case, then we would have to be able to find something apart from that basis of designation, apart from all of those various parts and so forth, that we can point to as being that thing, as having that kind of existence. So when it comes to like a seedling or for example, a person, they are just merely designated with these sorts of independence upon that basis of designation, independence upon the various designating terms and so forth. That is how we can posit a person. Or like if we take the example of a body, if you want to sort of find that body, that form that we then give the name body is an aggregation of all of the various elements. Here it explains that it's an aggregation of the 8 elements that'll come in the next here, continuing in the text, it says, however, this is not the case. Instead, forms such as seedlings exist as entities that are an aggregation of the 8 substances. So here, whether we use the example of the 8 substances like earth, water, fire, wind, or we look at, like, for example, the person as being an aggregation of the 6 kind of elements, adding to those empty space and consciousness. When we try to find such a self or an I, we can't find something that exists independent of that basis of designation. And there is no self or no I that is independent of all of those various parts. Like, for example, we need to have the sort of solidity of body. We need that earth element. We need to have heat. We need to have our breath going. We need that element of wind. We have to have the empty sort of space to allow for that breathing. And so in this way, a person and what it means to be a person, the existence of a person is dependently designated upon all of these various different things. Now, again, when it comes to this sort of positing this. However, this is not the case that there's that kind of independent existence. Instead, forms such as seedlings exist as entities that are an aggregation of the 8 substances. In the absence of those substances, they would no longer exist. There's nothing that we can point to, whether it's in a seedling or a person, that is independent of the various parts that make it up. So therefore, objects exist dependently and cannot exist objectively from their own side. So if a thing were partless, it would be untenable for it to exist dependently. Once an individual phenomena exists dependently and conventionally, it is tenable for it to have parts and to have a nature that is manifold. Therefore, something being a dependent arising refutes its having an independent or objective existence. So here, if something, again, according to the Prasangika school, there's no assertion of, say, partless particles or temporally partless moments of consciousness, because such things can't exist. For things that are conventionally existent, that have this kind of existence that is dependent and dependently designated, dependently originated, that refutes, that negates there being some kind of a partless basis of designation. So if things were existent from their own side or existent in their own right, perhaps there could be partless particles, but because there is no such existence that is independent in this way, everything therefore has parts. So here, then, this reasoning is profound and subtle, and the ultimate reason for this kind of refutation. So here in the Prasangika system, this reasoning of dependent origination is called the king of reasonings, because it is in dependence upon that one can refute the kind of objective existence that is being, we are mistaken with respect to. So here, again, this is referred to as like the king of reasonings.
Genna, we
Wait,
cannot
again, nganso kogimindu nga kogimindu.
다 그것도 해.
산다 거기.
그거 면도 살아. 알려.
2단계 망못
아야, 단데서 대다 공도 셰바다르 설류 장바 깨베 추다. 예베 추 데이터블로 공내에서 덤바산제 좀 된데 설류 장바를 쓰네 아니 결론 남려야 데데 송바레스 카르 송바레스네 수 텐진 레버는 좋아 셰바데스 교단 깬라 텐진 레버 좋아 데 야보지 신소나 송고라 아니 동바데시 용거라 네 최다 최파괴 남야라 게다 산제자네 통화를 송무세 산제자 토버교알 소바 어떻게 송어레세 지다 산게세데 로드게서 소데 데코나니라 로드게발 시기도아 데코나니 네루 타두들 로드게바 대소 용그레스 텐데 자네 드거라 야야나 최다 산제지 네루 타두자 통화교 그레스 텐데 자네 드거 그래 소소 대다르 때제 레버를 좋아 때제 레버를 좋아다 동배 추인데네서 다산지 좀 된다게 동반이다 텐데게 남샤지 소요르노 어디 사바스제 지게 좀게서데 스제 산지 사르바 잠샤바 텐데게 말에 송겨라 시겨라 대다 때제 레버를 좋아 동배 추인데네서 때제 레버를 좋아다 근데 랑원에 주베 동배 추인데네서 때제 레버를 좋아데 군주브로와 랑원에 주베 동바데 던담로와 야 군주다 가주 때제 레버를 좋아 쳐도도 랑원에 주바 템바 주바 랑원에 여바 랑신기 여바다시 통구여라 때나시 통하데 템바에 삼겨라 어디 군주베 쳐서라 군주 땡진기 거로 템바리 여바 나기 나베 쳐서 때제 레버를 좋아다 동배 쳐서 던담베 템바 네루 타두데 텐데 마레 랑원에 동바를 아주 통주내시 템바 마레 딜레션도 랑원에 동배 추유데세 템바니가 남샤송에 줘라 Dene Sungura, Dene, Tawara Shikbe, Tola Neba, Rawado, Shala Savar, Temper Jeba, Yingise, Sanje Chumden Dege, and Tola Tendeje Reda Yorese. Te any Sanje Chumden de Musum do Sene, Rawagi Kone Sumbanjera Mado, Shandaji Nalichi Shesha, Ra Rijiki Shunal Shesha, Tele Chasha Gure, Te Ingiris, Tendesumba Maresegora, Koranga Rawado Musum do Signe, and a Shala Tembanjeva Resegora. The Warishik Betola never, Rawado Shala, Tola never, Rangi Musum do Se, and then Sigba de Shala Tembanjeva, Yingis, Tembanjeva, some remado, they start to Chuban Zeba Chima Resegora. Sanje Jigden, Sanje Nam Jigden, come to Chera, Majoya Rosa, Sanje Shajatu Botabu, Tanda Jigden, come to Keba Manjiba Delia, Chamber Tongema, Sanje Jigden, Jigden do Choyaro, Sanje Choyane Cho Sumbare, Tembani Namsha Sumbare, Ina Majembe Negapsi, Ina Kutembani Namsha Terra Rede Yormado, team members of Sanje Pen Saba Sosha. Tendreke Marungu, Nesulete Yuba de Segara. Kina quotation gave you and the Tangende, Sanje Pemnani, Tembarese, Tendrekujura. Sanjanam Jidendo Chero, Machoron, Chernam Jetenji, Debarajo, Kunzube, Noam, Neju de Dance, Kunzub Garazo, Tamba Temba, Nava Nesu, Kunzub Temba de Dance. And a rate, Nelutado de Rangun, Tribe Tombe, Tantambe. Chuni Denisa, did never Kona in Bechiros or dinner she, Donna never, Sadu Chuba Zabachima, Resa Tandara. Moving Nezu than Tumba. Move Judan can let any kiss you than Dakshida Shashel and a true citizen Shishan, and a consultant Benelude, Sanje somebody Resa, changes in and move Kora Nezuli Yovachi somebody Mado Mevachi, and it Sadu Chushavachi, or Mareso, ya, teach Stola.
So here, then turning back to the Rice Seedling Sutra itself, it says then the Buddha was considering the above mentioned way that a rice seedling is produced. Here, when he explains this to the monks in this sutra, that the rice seedling is produced from causes and conditions and exists by way of depending on its basis of imputation and imputing terms and concepts. When he looked at a rice seedling and told his monks that whoever understands the dependent arising of a rice seedling understands the ontological status of the Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel. So here, it's really, when one understands well the way in which, say, a rice seedling is dependently originated, then one too will be able to understand the sort of ontological status of all things, and as well as the sort of eightfold path and the teachings of the Buddha and so forth. So here, the Buddha is encouraging one to expand their intelligence or increase their wisdom with respect to this in order to then also understand the way in which the Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel exist. So here, the Buddha did not invent the way of dependent arising and the way of emptiness. Here, it's not as though the Buddha created this or fabricated this, but rather he just clearly taught through his own power without others what in fact exists. For whether Buddhas appear in the world or not, the dependent arising of phenomena, their conventional reality, and their lack of objective existence, their ultimate reality, remain unchanged. So here it is, again, we have these two levels of truth, the sort of conventional being the dependent origination of phenomena, and ultimately they're lacking any kind of objective or independent autonomous sort of existence. And by way of understanding these two truths, one is then able to sort of follow after the Buddha's teachings. It is then the case, though, that the Buddha discovered reality. He did not invent the way of dependent arising and the way of emptiness, but rather it is the case that the Buddha, through his own power, through his own meditation and effort and so forth, came to understand that the way that things actually are, and based upon that then taught the way that things are to others. Whether Buddhas come into into the world or not. This is the reality. It's not as though the Buddha made this thing up or sort of created it, but based upon his knowledge was then able to give an explanation. So this is the sort of the teachings of the Buddha accord with the way that things are. It's not that something has been fabricated or created. Their nature remains unchanged in the presence of Buddhas or in their absence.
Sorry. Oh yeah, dan de da ma zo. Tawa chu chu se sto wa. Oh. Dan ara zo ge sanje chum de ge ken ne ngo sum de ken ji se ne sung ba wa. Sung ba inde dan ara zo ge ti nang ba che we ne ko sanje chum de sanje re de ara zo rim bi lo chang ba yin na sanje ye yo ba chi she yo ra. Ma zo dang ba re shi ko do stand ge che. Den ba tar tu be ki bu ti shen da che de ma ne dang bu ne yin ba che nga zo dang bu ne che thoma tanda du ste shisha shi ti mar do. Sanje chang me ba yo ra nga ra zo lo chang na ya dong le tar ye yo ba lang dor ji ne ma lu ba kim be she ja yo ba nga ra zo le sanje ji ru yu che ra. Nga zo sem de so bo de sha ru de che yi pung bo re de sem de se shi ru ba chi chi ne lu she ge na ge se chi se do wa. We ne zu she tu mo mai ben de ban do wa. De ba ina da ta ta ina da ma ba ina da samul ta ko shi bu ji she yo ra. O ti de ti ya ye chen so na sang bu cha de ya ye ta shi je ne lu la mong ba se ne o ti che ne nga zo rim ya tar che ne tar sang ge gi yo re se ti shi sha che song yo no ti me no song ge yo ma ro nga ra zo ge ma na shi du ste de ta wa de na temba ni nam sha da chang ju sem da samlu sang bu cha top chim bu ko ne kon du pe ya da shirab ji cha de ko ne kon du pe ne ka ga shem ba so ye samlu ta sem de ko tandam kon ro yo ra nga ye yo re cha do yo re ne lu ma shin ba chin ji lo du zim ba ma bu yo ra ke ma bu yo ra ina sem ko ra ge rang shin de yo sa wa se ye tang ji che ji re so ra nam ga de ta ya rang shin che re ina tim ba da chi chu da de ma bu ya de nyo ya yo no chu nyo ba de ko pa de nyo sha yo de ina ko ra ya bu ji sha na nyo ba de pa ta ne当然人生前就也有了，我听到身边人生为啥哇？怎么那么路不罗啊些？就怎么路不罗，因为等俺就到rob哈过多，你看着差不是不是那个水吧公那，那看着穷些，水吧公也修吃多啦，那俺也先不行，那俺也买这个些法，提前的可查这有了，查多先不去个些，没想到查多些。ngara jibu ma do shenda ya putin de me gu samse chado chenge china ko chado kyen shi ji samlu tan nyor re yora ngara su to so ha ku do so chang ba che ne ya cha re yo ba tambo ka ge sing yo ma re ne chi ji den kam yo ne ka ga se yi gre chi lab chi che pa je se che ya she de ji den kam le she chen de she cha do tar chi pe ka chi ju ma bu shin ya do o tina shi chi ngo bo la ya ya ga da ya ge chou du ji ba ma bu yo re che ra ya ni ma bu yo da pyu ju le ja pyu ju wa ga shi ji den de na tong ji den ngo bo le pyu du ju wa ya shi ren bu chen ki ne ya shi za che shi ren dan che shi den de yo re do xing do na le ko ya ni re ju ma bu yo gu do tian de na ge sem ya chang ba che ne mi le ren ba ya re da ya ga da jing da ma bu du ju yo se yo ta o ti in du kar so ra ti ton da le dang ra ju ge ta wa chö ko yo ra sa ro tang ko re cha ba ni ji kom ko re kar jen kong ge ra dang zo ya ge ya ro ko yo ra ta ne she tong ba ni le so bo ngo be ne su te chö ko yo ra ti ta wa chu chu sti she yo ra lam ya ti chi so sha na mo ra o ti kyo.
So here, then the next section is how to seek the view. So here, the Buddha has seen directly this kind of truth and then taught that truth to us. And so we too, it's not as though like the Buddha was primordially enlightened and we are just kind of stuck here in samsara. It's not as though the Buddha, I mean, there would be no point in the Buddha teaching to us if we could not also achieve that same kind of a state. If we were all just kind of stuck in samsara and there were no way to get out of that, then there would be no point in the Buddha giving this. And it's not as though the Buddha is fundamentally different from us. We all have this kind of Buddha nature. We have the capacity to become fully enlightened. It is the case that our mind has the nature of being clear and knowing. It is, again, we will cast off our sort of impure bodies, but that mind, that continuity of mind remains, and that has the potential to reach full enlightenment. So we had this kind of clear and knowing nature in the past, we have this now, we will have that in the future. And if we work to remove the kind of obstacles, if we work to actually develop those kinds of good qualities, that is the purpose of the teachings. There's no other purpose, otherwise there would be no reason for the Buddha to give these teachings at all if it weren't the case that we couldn't work with our mind, but rather we can. We have that kind of ability, and we have the ability to work on, say, the method side, increase more and more our love and compassion and bodhicitta and those kinds of good qualities, as well as our wisdom, our intelligence, by developing that over time. So as it is said, the nature of mind is clear light. The stains are adventitious. They haven't penetrated the nature of our mind. They aren't such that they're inextricably mixed in with our mind, like the same way that the sky can be filled with clouds or water can be made dirty, but it isn't the case that those sort of stains penetrate into the nature of that. Our mind has this nature of clear light, and it is such that we are able to completely purify and eliminate those adventitious stains if in stages we develop and work to improve and work with our mind. We have the capacity to become fully enlightened like a Buddha. And there we can know sort of on a smaller scale examples from our own experience. We can see someone who is, say, maybe very angry, or someone who is really jealous, or someone who is really prideful. And based upon seeing the defects of those attitudes, like someone who's always really jealous and just wants bad things for other people and only good for themselves and so forth, by seeing the defects of that and gradually working on it, they can become less jealous. We can see that there is the capacity to transform and work with our mind. So starting with that kind of knowing that the nature of our mind is such that we can actually make improvements in our knowledge and our conduct and so forth. This is something that is the most valuable kind of thing. This is the best kind of sort of jewel or wealth that we could have. We can gain the most valuable kind of state from working with this natural nature of our mind. So if we do make an effort to develop those kinds of good, positive qualities and eliminate those kinds of stains, we have the capacity to actually become Buddhas ourselves. And so we do this through developing a practice of the method side of the path, as well as, like in this section here, seek out the view, seek to develop our wisdom, emulating and following the Buddhas of the past.
Oh yeah. Oh, tawa chuchuche. Lamda debi namsha michuk basigura. Lamda debi namsha michuk. Lam ya ko kasa. Ngesong ne che ngodo lami koba toptene ya lam kombal tene tarwa toptene ya tamje kimbe koba topche lam mambu tuye yorto shirab ki cha ta sangbu changi de sangar chene lam ki rimba mambu chi ya tuye yorwa kindu lam dan rebu namsha michuk ba desa lam de na tele tene mambu yonjun rebu namsha de manora che chuksudu nordora Manora che yabuchi tenla bipsu Manoa che yabuchi yuala tambu tawa tenla bipsu le rale bare sigora Tanganzu di tanda karsore midabare kudan kenle tene kebare juroche re sidu soso semda charne taku yora semle kyuchu tanya tandaliya chamba nyinchi chanju semsera midabada chi tamebada chi tezu shegyora di karsore shiche nezu kyangya shebe chedu shegyo mara taina garanzo pejetadu samsang tende doa nezu ko kyangya shenya mato soso semda dan drawa mashana ane sheje kyangya se dengeri sire sora sheje nelu se mato di inji beji mune sene semda drel go yora tanda ganzo semgi dereje samde doa tangzi tabwa jingi doa se te mare da se meda bare dustu samla tangure se shegyora 잠반이 지단 저저 담보 가서 디레도아 밀 차도 지기도아 소소마도 삼기메도아 텐데 마르다 텐데 삼을 땅고래 대이체는 란다 샤가갈 뱅그레스 탑기차 삼부차데 셰디자 따와셰기네 소소 셈레 교아드야 치도 소소 단데 셈기 삼을 땅다 디도아 디마렌 데레스 야케 땅고 대셰기 와라마도 시제 내주 좀 땡라 베베치도 셰기 오마로아 어 대송자코 람다 데부세데라 rimjiya zhu go bata yaje tanggen chi shisha chen de she go ra lamden debu namsha mechu ba shi tawa tenla bechula ra shi tawa ngobu korang ge ne chu de tenla ba tele tatanda samdaro ngobu le tatanda samda norgu ora simjen le jawa chi du ta tele ya samla tanda da randa shenda tada norgu ora tezu gyurju ta ya tandala de tembanyi da tabda shirab ki kaji she go ora 시 따와따라 뵙줄라 라레베 따와따라 뵙주네세 오래 어디봐도 지시하나 담보 안티 어디시나 까마트야.
So here then on this section of how to seek the view, it says an unmistaken exposition of the path and its resultant state depends on how you ascertain the philosophical view of phenomena. So here there are various sorts of paths, those kinds of paths or methods by which we are able to in sequence gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, those paths by which one is able to gain the state of liberation, and those paths by which one is ultimately able to become a Buddha for the benefit of others. These paths involve developing our wisdom, our understanding, as well as the kind of method side, that fundamental goodness. And we need to have a kind of unmistaken path. If we have an unmistaken or a mistaken sort of exposition, then we are going to go astray. But here, when we read the various teachings of the Buddha, like for example, that all impermanent things arise from causes and conditions, this is to counteract our view of things as being permanent. Or when we hear teachings on love and compassion, this is in order that we might develop those qualities within ourselves. Although we often talk about sort of this ascertaining the philosophical view of phenomena, the Buddha's teachings are not just to sort of know things out there, but it's about connecting with our own mind. We need to actually, when we are, say, being taught impermanence, recognize how we hold things to be permanent and work on our own sense of grasping at things as permanent through those teachings on impermanence. Or by recognizing the sort of defects of thinking only of ourselves and only working for our own aims, we then begin to see the benefits of cherishing others and developing love and compassion and so forth. But all of these things are explained not just to sort of give a story about external things, but to be connected with our own mind, to see the way that things are in order to correct the way that we normally see things. So the Buddha teaches things like the two truths, the various paths and results and so forth, the methods by which one is able to attain them, in a way that we are really to apply them to our own way of thinking and our own mind. It shouldn't just be that we are viewing these as things that are explaining like a story or something that is out there. Rather, these teachings are in order to really work with our own mind. So our time is up for today, so we will stop there for now.
Finish with May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it,